Audiolicious.
Hello, Facebook.
Hello, Facebook world.
In a perfect world, we're going to pop up live here in a minute.
Oh, cool.
We're not really here. It's the Matrix.
It's Yep. Well, we're not live yet. There we go. Hey, we made it. And look, we have audio.
Oh,
Yeah, we are online. Welcome back to the podcast on location
on location.
in
I
the
like
kitchen.
Yeah. So it probably sounds a little weird, but that's just because we're having to do things a little different.
that.
Yep.
Because we're weird.
And it's cold and wet and rainy outside, and we are in the kitchen. I'm here with my daughter today, so we had to move out of the studio, and the guys braved the rain because they're made of sugar and spice and melt in the rain. And so, anyway, we don't have all of our tricks and all of our cool things to look at all today.
Today is raw podcast.
Raw
Raw and unfiltered.
and unfiltered. There's not even any editing going on. We're just so if you happen to be out there at your lunch break or whatever, and you're hopped on to this is not even our usual day to be live on Facebook. I just kicked them all off because it's different, and we're doing it different today. And there you are.
There you are.
So if you are out there and happen to be watching us, let us know in the Facebook comments or whatever. I don't have the chat up in the app because, well, frankly, because I can't do everything at once. But anyway, last week we talked about what did we talk about last week?
We talked last week?
Yeah, something about marriage.
Yes.
Yeah.
I literally completely drawn a blank. But dealing with conflict, that's what we talked
Yeah.
about. Dealing with
Yeah.
conflict in marriage. And which I don't have any in my marriage. I don't know about you
never
guys.
had one. I've never
That's called a lie.
had
You just say that because you know my wife.
one.
And I'm on her side all the time.
I know you
because
are. You
I've
gang
been
up
bit
on me.
before. I'm not
You're
doing,
not doing that again. But today, and this kind of series that I guess it's a series when you want to call it that we're in, we're literally we're answering questions from some viewers. One particular, he sent us in a list of stuff, and
a long list.
I think
of
there was
stuff.
65 items on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've crunched it down into about 45 or 50 topics.
Yep.
But they weren't just from him. They were just from coworkers and peers at church and things like that. And so we started with dealing with conflict in marriage. Today we're going to talk about supporting your spouse.
Yeah.
What in the world does that even mean?
Well, if we can back up to what you were just talking about.
Do it.
I got really excited when the guy sent the list in and we started looking at it, because that's what I always kind of envisioned this to be, was a safe place that you can go and ask questions, right? That you may not feel necessarily comfortable asking folks closer to you, right?
Right.
Gives you a little bit of anonymity. Is that a good word? Right?
Yeah.
A little bit of a safe spot just to kind of share whatever.
Well, and that's exactly right. I know we've had Lauren on before. Lauren Waketer. She had a bunch of questions she wanted to talk to, and we're like, "Hey, just come on the show."
Yeah.
And and she kind of did the same thing. And we were talking before, Tim and I, before we got on the air, and just this week. I always want to be real careful not to give people. We talk about this all the time on the show, and just as brothers. A lot of times people ask these sorts of questions hoping we're just going to give them, well, if you do these 3 things, everything's going to be great.
Right.
That's not the spirit behind these questions that he sent, but a lot of times people are really, and we know that's true because if you just go look at the success of self-help books.
Oh yeah.
When you go to the library, you go to Barnes and Noble, I mean, they're all out there.
Right.
Walking with Jesus doesn't really work that way.
Right.
And so, we kind of come back to, and I sent these guys show notes, and I was like, kingdomize these things.
Right.
These notes, meaning we talked about it going through 1 Corinthians. There are practical answers, and we want to talk about that. And then there are also kind of the ultimate answers that we want to help you get to. So what I've asked these guys to do kind of in preparation for today is to think about and be prepared to kind of share with ways that they practically support. Now, let's back up one more level. That's kind of a junk drawer word. When I
Mhm.
say, how do you support your spouse? What do you kind of stuff you think of? I don't care who starts. Like, what do you mean? I don't necessarily mean cheerleading, going, "You're so awesome."
Mm,
That's
right.
not what I mean. But
Well, if I can, I'll start as
do it.
uh,
Check our
when
fees.
Hudson was born. We had an opportunity to where when he was a little dude, uh, financially, we were able to make some extra money because I could do some extra work,
Gotcha.
which meant that she had to take on extra time with the kid, right? So us supporting each other looked like, okay, to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I have to go to bed at 8:30 or 9. And I did that every night. And if there was something that went wrong during the night, Sandy took care of it.
Understand?
Okay. I got up 3 o'clock, got my stuff together, went to work, came home from work. And as soon as I walked through the door from work, I supported her by then saying, hey, I got the kid. You go take a bath, go get some coffee or whatever you want to do. Right. So that to me, that's an example of mutually practically supporting each other.
You ever do anything like that, or are you a bum? I know the answer to that question, but he's not a bum. He's very supportive. You don't think
He's
in
a
those
supportive
terms.
bum.
I want to be a bum. Well, I've been married for like
Ever.
120 years.
Well, that I don't want to jump in there, but
he's gonna.
I'm gonna. So as we're answering these questions, not to say that we have any market cornered or that we do it right or we do it well, but we're on 30 years. Where are you at?
We'll be 31 in April.
And where are you guys at?
Methuselah,
Married in 86, so that was 38ish.
Yeah,
He has, to,
38,
he, has, he has to figure it up on an abacus.
Right. So
you're knocking on 40 years of marriage.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If she continues to have
So we
you.
should listen to what you have to say. Go ahead, old great and wise old guy.
Well, if you have to listen to me as a great and old wise guy, you're in trouble. So I have to pull it back a little bit. In terms of kingdom speak, so look,
It is what it is, though.
Philippians 2, verse 3.
Going to the Bible. What's he thinking?
Right.
Well,
Why are we laughing?
well, that's a practical thing, and I mean, obviously, duh.
Right. Come on.
But we lose those things when we get in the throes of life.
Right. Right.
And so
That's good.
We lose what things? What do you mean?
That he answers her.
So if it's a practical
gotcha,
thing,
gotcha,
right?
Gotcha.
So, and we all three got different upbringings here. So, I had Christian parents or my grandparents. I was taken to church, but we didn't talk about the scriptures really at home, or I didn't have any infeeding, right?
Gotcha.
And this is kind of a side to something else that I've kind of been studying, and I've believed it for a long time. But if you teach your children the things of the scriptures and you read the scriptures, or you get, and this is just an example, and they grow up and they're heathens, that was not a waste of time.
Oh, yeah.
Because, well, here's why, right? So God says, my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. And that's a big statement in the terms that the Creator doesn't really expect us all the time to grasp where He's at.
Right.
And so He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and spirit, and treat your neighbor as yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know how to love the Lord God, all that stuff all the time. So we do things we're supposed to do, right? We go to church, we read the Bible, we do those things, right? those are practical steps, and we push that all the time. And here's the reason why all this long dissertation. The Spirit, if you're really trying to pursue the kingdom, He will bring those things back up in a proper context somewhere, I think.
Good. That's good.
And you might not even remember it, right?
Right.
So the testimony of your witness, I'm old enough and I've been around long enough that I've been able to watch people start in one place and turn out in something completely different that I never would have thought they would have been like or something. Like Ben Butler, the guy that runs the ministry that I deal with all the time. I mean, that guy's rough as a cob, or he was. And he's, depending on how you look at him, he probably is still kind of rough as a cob. But that guy loves God. And I couldn't even come to that conclusion without watching all the stuff he had done up until now. And it's based because he was pursuing things of the kingdom, right? So, with all that blah blah and going on, going to the Bible here and thinking about how we do this practically. So, and it's just an example. It says it in other places too, but Philippians chapter 2, do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit,
Right.
but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves.
Right.
That's one.
Yeah.
Right.
Do not merely look out for your own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. That's two. And then it goes into, that's the attitude that Christ had to have to even come here, right?
Right.
And he's not the great teacher. He is our salvation. Now,
He's not only the great teacher,
right.
and he is a great
If
teacher.
you're going to look for him as the great teacher, you're going to get a lot of good stuff, and that's implanted too. Don't get me wrong. That's the same thing as reading the stuff, right? But he's not doing it to be the great teacher.
Right.
He's coming in as the creator, and he's going to roll that stuff up. So what does that mean in supporting my wife? When you marry somebody and you got the long-term commitment in your mind, you will come to places where you can't stand one another and you would much rather be somewhere else.
Right. I got you.
Yeah.
And I mean, be somewhere else in an instantaneous flash or maybe a couple hours or a few
Right. I
days.
got you.
You're in a place where you're going, I wish I had never met this person. That's your flesh, right? And to deny that that could ever transpire would mean that you really don't grasp eternal stuff to a certain degree. And I don't mean that as a condemnation. So, one, the commitment to be there, right? And so if you're pursuing the kingdom and you're just looking at the words here, regard one another as more important than yourself. So a marriage is a great place to do that.
Right. Right.
We are all inherently selfish in one level or another. So I asked my wife, what do I do that supports you? Matt made me ask her
I
that
did.
question.
I made him. I was like, you can ask her.
And she just laid out simple stuff. My wife is a dreamer and an idea girl, and she'll have 500 ideas a day, and I'm stumped because I have no idea how to. Most of them she doesn't even care to try to pursue, right? But I take it as a serious thing.
Right.
So she decided after many years she wanted to try to pursue music in some kind of professional sense. Well, I really had no desire to go do that, but I knew she had the talent stuff, right? And I had the technical know-how. So I just went and did it. I did the mixing. I put things together. I helped her do all the stuff. I followed her when I didn't want to go. I had work. I have yada, 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 yada.
Right.
And you were talking about kids, right? Well, I had 3 of them in diapers at once.
Right. Right.
And I was working as a policeman in those days. And I worked, my shift changed every 30 days. So it'd be days, nights, evenings, and I had 2 shifts that were mixtures of those things, right? So I never knew whether I was coming or going. And she was a different kind of mom. She wasn't sitting around going, "Oh, I need my space." She'd strap 1 on her and 2 in the deal, and she wanted to go to the store. She went to the store. She didn't look for a whole lot of input from me, and I had to work to do that. I would love to tell you it should have been natural to help with my kids. And it's not because I was a low life or anything like that. It's just
It's not wired that way.
Well, I wasn't an only child, but I pretty much grew up by myself. My family was all split up. So anyway, and I wanted to, I loved my kids and all that stuff. And she raised her brothers kind of, so she had an idea of what, and she wanted to be a mama all of her life, right? So it was hardwired into her. But to support her, I changed diapers from day one. I had notions that, I wanted to go and do this and be that. And I would find myself in, wanting to go, no, but I was growing in the Lord at the same time. Right. And so I, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself. That stuff's ringing in my head, and all the stuff we've been talking about for a couple, 3 years now. Taking that thought captive and chunking it out. Yeah. That's the supporting function of how I support my wife, and I've learned more about the kingdom because of watching her.
Yeah,
I knew nothing about life. I mean, living here and enjoying it, that kind of stuff, that's not where I am. So call it reciprocal or whatever you want. She wasn't trying to teach me that. That's just what I learned. That makes sense. And so what's the practical thing? Read the things about the kingdom.
Yeah.
And if you have to make it a step, make it a step. And so.
Well, and go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, I've been babbling on here forever. I'm just. It's causation.
It's a clock on it. I can see how long
it's. And I guess the willingness to do it. I hear so many things these days about how I need my time and I need. And there's nothing wrong with those. I'm not really beating that up.
Well,
but you're looking at yourself when you're doing that.
But there can be.
Well, sure, there can be.
My turn.
Go.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're
no, because I don't want to
jumping in where you're at.
Yeah, I don't want to lose that spot.
Well, I'm not. So consider the other more important than yourself, and don't look merely to your own interest. You may say, "Well, I'm not doing that." You got to look and see. You may be.
Well, and I was talking with Tammy this morning, and our culture, and I was telling you all ago too. If you look at marriage and supporting whatever it is, anything, but specifically we're talking about our marriages. If you look at it through the lens of the culture, it's going to be screwed up.
Right.
That's where the me time comes in. Our culture right now, especially the ones coming up, have been indoctrinated with the fact that you're important. You need to be validated, and that's how we have this whole gender dysphoria weirdness going on, because people are validating weird inclinations or whatever. And that's the culture we live in. When I was growing up, everybody wanted to preach out of Ephesians 5 and talk about submitting to your husband and all that stuff. And they never spent any time on the mutual submission part of that passage, and never talked about husbands submitting themselves to their wives as Christ did for the church and died for her. Like, what did Jesus do for the church? Is he gave up everything that meant anything to him to gain everything that meant anything to him.
Right.
And I preached a sermon series one time that being married is not about being in love. And it's not. It's great. That's gravy. But it's designed biblically to be a picture of Jesus' relationship with the church.
Sandy and I, we were about the first 5 years, and don't hear this wrong, being in love got us about 5 years in.
Yeah.
But there was a point about 5 years in where my wife just decided, hey, we're going to be married.
Exactly.
That wasn't the background and culture I came from. But about 5 years in, no matter what day it was, how bad or how good it was, how good or how bad it was, whatever you want to do there with the scale, right?
Yeah.
She had just decided we were married.
Yep.
Right? So there's intentionality in that.
Well, and that's just it. Like on my side of the family, my parents are still married, been married, a million years. My dad's parents were married for 60 years
Right.
when they passed away. My mom's parents were married when he passed away. And then you go beyond them two, and you've got train wrecks. And then on my wife's side, there's been lots of relational issues in marriage and things like that and stuff. And so there was this. I came to the table with, oh, this is just what it is.
Right.
Sometimes it's going to be awful, and it's okay.
Right.
And it's not like the relationship necessarily. The circumstances are going to
Right.
suck.
Right. Gotcha.
But then I didn't come from that. Like you said, wasn't wired that way. I was wired. Oh, we're in this. You
Yeah.
know. Even it was the joke was when we were getting married. I was fixing to come out at the church. We're at Little Hope Baptist Church on the right hand side over here, over on the Oregon side, in the little back room, and my dad opens the back door and he's like, "This is it. This is your last shot. I'll cover for you if you want to go." And we laughed, ha, ha, and I was like, "Are you serious?" And he was kind of like, "No, seriously. If you don't want to do it, this is it. Like once you go through it, there's no getting out of it." That was his point. He was
Right.
making.
Exactly.
He
Yeah.
wasn't trying not to get me to get married. He was
Right.
just driving home the point that you're in this.
Right.
And we've tried to instill that. And so,
Old country song. You come from a long line of love.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
This is just what we do here. And then when we got married, Tammy kind of came to the Lord right after that. And it's just literally because of what we've seen and heard, it's never been on the table. Just like you said, no matter what happens,
Right.
this is what it's going to be. So we better make the best of it.
Right.
And
Right.
I have learned, is what Tim was saying, in 30 years of marriage, you pick up a few things, as you guys could attest, is that the more that you pursue Christ, the things of the kingdom, whatever they are, pick something, anything. If it brings you closer to, gives you better knowledge of who God is, that's the number one thing you can do to support your spouse, is because that will make you a different person. It'll make
Right.
you the person
Right.
that
Right.
they need, whatever that is. It's not
Right.
like I need to go read a book, whatever. I'll go read a book. I don't care. Some
Mhm.
books are good, but to be like Jesus, why does that help a marriage? Because of what Tim just read.
Right.
It's
Right.
and it's not just in your marriage. One of the ways that I try to practically support Tammy, you talked about doing diapers.
Mhm.
And you did diapers, you did taking the kid. We were in the same boat, except a lot of times I worked nights and she worked days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we were high fiving at the door.
Right.
And
Right.
and so there was no option.
Right.
But then Brenna came along.
Right.
And dude, it's hard work taking care of her by yourself,
Yeah.
especially if she's sick or whatever. And so we've developed this rhythm with each other in 30 years, and 20 years,
Mhm.
18 years of her being alive. We know what each other's going to think. We know how each other's are going to approach a problem. The biggest support, I'll say it this way: there's going to be different seasons of needing different support.
Yes.
When Hudson was
Absolutely.
little, she needed a break. When
Right.
the kids needed to, if she needed a break, or maybe whatever the thing was in y'all's world, if she needed a break from homeschooling. Because sometimes I know how that. I remember some of those days. Those homeschool moms would be like, "I don't ever want to have another child again." Okay, and I get it because I was a
Right.
teacher with everybody
Right.
else's kids, and I was like, I don't understand. I couldn't do it. And so there's those kind of things. But for me, one of the biggest things is the seasons have changed.
Mhm.
Is little stuff. It on the surface is a practical thing. For instance, she's putting her together a room in the house. I call it her she shed, though it's not a shed, it's just a room.
Mhm.
This is
Mhm.
her space. It's got a lock on the door.
Mhm.
The grandkids don't go in there.
Right.
That is her retreat space.
Right.
We're 30 years in and
Mhm.
just now able to have that space.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But if she needs to go retreat to that space, go retreat to that space. What do
Right.
I can take care of things and not be a little boy.
Mhm.
I can be a grown man, take care of let her have her space.
Yeah. I know. I got you.
I think the world's full of a lot of grown men or little boys that shave.
Come on.
It's time to
Woo.
you got to grow up.
Look
And
out.
it's not about. And I saw there's this dude online. I don't know if you listen to him or not. I don't even know his name. He's got a big cowboy hat on, big beard, and he's out there talking, and everybody's kind of glommed onto him. I don't know who he is. I'm not even trying to give aspersions, but some of the stuff that's coming out of his mouth about what it means to be a real man has nothing to do with what Tim just read, and it irritates me. You know, he's chewing leather, and you don't need to go to counseling because you're a real man, and you don't need to have any feelings if you're a real man. And I don't want to punch the guy in the face, but what really you want to be a real man for your spouse, or if you really want to be a good wife for your husband, go back into Philippians, what Tim just read, and realize this ain't about you. That's the biggest thing I've learned in 30 years of marriage. This ain't about me.
Yeah.
Everything that I do has got to have somebody else at the top of the decision tree,
Yeah.
not me.
I had a guy at work one day who was just super frustrated with everything that was going on around him. And we talked a couple of times, and he was just really angry. And he came and asked me, he said, "Hey, can we talk?" So we went across to a little conference room there, and we closed the door. And when I closed the door, I said, "Hey, look, before we start this conversation, you need to know you just quit talking to your coworker and you started talking to your pastor." And first thing I told him is that, you know, the things that you're struggling with here, you can't do unless there's a certain amount of humility in your life. Right?
Yeah.
You've got to have some humility to be able to do some of these things. And then I was able to say, exactly. Humility came up in Proverbs 11 this morning in my daily reading too,
Yeah.
right? I said, now, you can't be a good employee. You can't be a good leader. You can't be a good employee. And what's more important, you can't be a good dad. You can't be a good husband. You can't be any of those things unless there's humility involved, and not just involved, but your focus point.
Yeah.
It's not about you, right?
Yeah.
And the more we can take it and say, "Wow, okay, I know this is recorded, and I probably shouldn't say this, but my wife is, when I married her, she is this bohemian princess, right? If
I don't even know what that means.
If there is
Is she like Moana? What do you mean by
if
that?
there is a flat surface, it's got a basket or a cool rock or a cool
Okay.
piece of glass or some little piece of furniture or something she found in our house. And my personality is exactly opposite. I would have like 3 pieces of furniture, 5 or 6 books in the house.
One coffee cup.
Exactly, you know, and that's just how I'm wired. But over 30 years, it became more and more of, you know what? It kind of makes me crazy when I come in the kitchen and I got to move this to do that. But it's not my thing.
Right.
It's not about me. It's where she's comfortable.
Yeah.
So if she's comfortable, then I just got to take parts of me and throw it out the door. Right. And that's what we're called to do. Tim pointed in scripture. That's what we're called to do whenever we're allowing Holy Spirit to take over our spiritual lives.
Yes.
The more we take pieces of us and crumple them up and throw them in the trash can and say, now you go live in that space. Right?
Right.
It's the same principle.
Yeah. And you know, the biggest thing that we can do as men, as women that are out there that happen to be watching too, for our spouses, is to do what you read, which is to consider others more important
Amen.
than we are.
Well, and that statement is Old Testament stuff too.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, yeah.
and from way back in the beginning, it was said in one form or another. But even in Deuteronomy 6, you know, when he says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and your neighbor as yourself," it's the exact same thing that he's saying here. So my point is that it's not old stuff, and it wasn't. I mean, that's the crux of, even Jesus said that,
Right?
And it seems like a very simple statement. And I guess what if I'm talking to the Christians? What that means is that the Spirit of the Lord is going to start digging in you to tell you and show you things about yourself. And we've been talking about Cain here lately. And I would encourage everybody to go back and read that encounter between God and Cain. Because what that is a picture of the right to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking about the marriage here, right? because where you got the man and the woman in the same house, you can categorize personalities all you want. You can say there's 2 of them, 3 of them, 5 of them, 6 of them. But for however many billions of people are in the world, from God's perspective, there's that many different personalities.
Yeah.
So if you think you're going to horseshoe everybody into some place to be able to, if I'm trying to serve them and I can figure out what they're like, then I can make it all work out. Well, I'm here to tell you, God's going to put you in a pot and stir that up, and it's not going to work out. So and I don't mean like your marriage is going to fall apart. I mean, when you think that you know it, you've been in marriage long enough, you start going, I don't have a clue what to do here. No matter what I do, I'm read wrong, I'm seen wrong, I'm heard wrong, heard wrong, heard wrong. and I'm honestly trying to do the kingdom thing. So I'm talking to the Christians right now. That's where God has utterly frustrated you and make you have to come to him for the answer and the insight. And that may take minutes and it might take weeks or months.
Well, and the other thing that on what you just said there is how do because that's the question is how do you show support for your spouse?
Well,
What I don't want to lose what you just said though, which was together pursuing who Jesus is.
Right.
And understanding the nature and character of God, together doing that on that same path together, and not having the expectation of what you think the other one should be.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. Oh my Lord, I hope Tammy doesn't see this.
That comes back the other direction too.
It does. When I'm an extrovert.
Okay? No.
Yeah, it's true. I know I keep it hidden, but and Tammy is not. Tammy is an introvert.
No.
I know, right? And introverts seem to always marry extroverts.
Mm-hmm.
For probably seriously, and to my discredit, for probably 20 years, I had the viewpoint that extroverts were right, introverts were broken.
Mm-hmm.
What you hold that for later? Okay,
I've got it. I got my finger on
and I, as a minister, here's another layer. I kind of had this vision of what I expected a minister's wife to be.
Mm-hmm.
She had to be extroverted. She had to lead all the Bible studies. She had to be the women's pastor, as it were. And then on top of that expectation, I had an idea what that looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was going to be an extrovert,
right.
Right.
And I'm laughing with you. I'm not laughing at you.
And so I've got this introverted wife who I want to be an extrovert and fill an extroverted role that God did not design, desire, or wire her to fill.
Right.
And I spent a long time frustrated trying to fix her.
Right.
And till God...
Lovingly so.
Not really. No. I wanted to... Right. No, my heart was right because it's like, oh, bless your heart, baby. If you would just do this, if you just... And it caused conflict and rub or whatever. And then it was just epiphany if it was over time. I don't know. But when I realized, wait a second, God built her the way he built her. Part of that was understanding with Brenna, God built her the way he built her.
Right.
Wait. Oh, so introverts aren't broken.
Right.
Because they're not extroverts. Oh, They have a different role to play. And I can look back now and see that she was such a strength for me in the background that she could not have been through some really rocky years in the ministry, in the family, had she been out front and where I thought she should be. My rear guard would have been undefended.
Right. Because personality-wise, right? Oftentimes, I'll try to edit this to make it biblically friendly, but oftentimes, my wife is very extroverted, and I was super introvert years ago, right? But at the same time, with that outwardly, there's a confidence and there's something in that outward expression of who you are, right?
Right.
But introverts will cut for you when nobody's looking.
They'll. What does that saying say? They'll fight for you in rooms you're not in.
Exactly. And yeah, they are the person in your tribe that is the war council when things go bad, right?
Well,
and we got to have that.
and they can see stuff that we can't see.
That's right.
And the overstretching question, it's kind of a simplistic question. How do you support your spouse? That has, like Paul said in Corinthians, there are some things you can do to just support your wife.
Right.
Don't be a turd, that kind of thing.
But what you just said, I think, is the key to this whole conversation.
I missed it.
You missed it. It was good too.
Well,
You better go back and write this down. No.
Yeah. What'd I say?
How do you support your spouse? Is understanding that your spouse is different.
Yeah.
And appreciating those differences.
Well, it's learning to do that.
Yeah.
You're going to learn to do that. So from a practical standpoint, we can say all this stuff.
30 years in, we've learned to do that. But at 5, they don't know that you have to learn to do that.
Oh, and see, if somebody would have told me 15 years ahead of when I figured it out that she's not broken, here's how I think. I could have saved myself a lot of grief. But what's true is I could have saved her a lot of grief.
Right.
Well,
of me pushing back on things I shouldn't have pushed back on.
Come on.
Stupid.
Let me.
Come on, Jim, we're having real talk here. Get in it.
You're not going to learn all the right things to do and do them.
Right. That's good.
Well, hold on. So you everything that you just said, and I can appreciate that, man. I've caused my wife.
Yes, you have.
So much grief. Nobody's asking you what you said.
Hey, it's just true.
This is for TV land.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I've caused her so much grief, and so I can look back at the things I know now, and I can see things that maybe I did or maybe I didn't do. And the knee-jerk reaction is if somebody would have just told me that.
Right.
And I think I believe that. But I can tell you right now, if somebody would have told me that, I'd been like, huh? What?
Right.
Not because I wasn't trying to get it or even eat up in selfishness. I just couldn't grasp it.
Right.
So I say all that because in verse 12 of chapter 2, this wasn't part of
Philippians 2, by the way.
Philippians 2. Yeah. So then, my beloved, just as you have always obeyed, you might be able to go, well, I don't know about that one. Not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Mm-hmm. So I say that because to use your scenario, I would tell you that if I had come to you and said, Matt, what are you doing?
I might have punched you.
You would have been like, you don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here.
Right.
I could have interpreted that as selfishness or whatever, but I'm telling you, God was looking at going, I'm going to stir this boy up. And when he gets it, he's going to see it. And then you got the option. Do I want to be like Cain and tell God to go kiss a duck? Or do I want to go?
That's in Hesitations 4.
Oh, yeah. So, but that whole thing is working out your salvation with fear and trembling. That's what it looks like. Oh, I want to have a good marriage. I want to be able to serve my spouse. I want to be able to do all this. And listen, I'm talking about me serving my spouse. I'm not talking about my spouse serving me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I have come to the conclusion that, one, I can't have that expectation. And I don't mean because she's doing things wrong. I have to define these things of the kingdom, even if I can see that she needs to be this or do that or whatever it is. And I have to be real careful saying that because I may be seeing it completely wrong.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Come on.
And I trust in the Lord more so now than I did before.
Right.
That when I'm frustrated or irritated, that either I feel like I'm not communicating or she's not doing this or she ought to be doing that. That's where I've learned to take that and I just go deal with the Lord over it. Sometimes hesitatingly, sometimes I don't do it very well. Sometimes I'm ignoring him because I really don't want the answer. And sometimes I know what that is. But I go and spend time with him to work through those things now. And he'll work out the other end of it.
Yes.
Now, does that mean that she's going to finally get the epiphany and come to fruition and life's going to be great? Not necessarily.
And she's saying the same thing about you.
It may mean that Tim gets it.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, and I think what Tim's reading there is that it's God that's doing and willing and working in you for his good pleasure.
Amen.
In all of this back and forth, figuring it out, Lauren just said something really interesting here, guys. She said in 20 years of marriage, the best advice she's ever had was to wake up every day and choose your spouse.
Yes.
Yes.
And
that's
that's it.
That's what Bruce was talking about a while ago. When Sandy got to a point 5 years in, oh, we're just going to be married.
Yeah.
You may suck at it. I may suck at it. But we're going to suck at it together.
Right. Right.
You had your finger on some stuff, and I don't want to lose it before we get too far out of here.
No, it's just the same stuff. You're in Philippians, and I was in Proverbs this morning in my daily reading, but it comes back around to the same stuff. Proverbs 11:2. When arrogance comes, disgrace follows, but with humility comes wisdom. And over in verse 24, one person gives freely yet gains more. Man, that is one person gives freely yet gains more. And Tim has said over and over and over is that when we reach this point to where it becomes about us giving and not what they give back.
Yes.
Right. And that you can take that to every relationship, down to your relationship to Christ, right?
Yep.
Seeking him for the sake of seeking him. It's the same thing with our spouse. We serve them for the sake of serving them.
Well, the flip side of being out in just the world and being a Christian, those same attributes have to do with how I have to deal with Matt and I have to deal with Dingling over here.
Bruce.
However, I know it's Bruce, but Dingling sounded better. Because he can take it. And appreciate it, actually.
We're running out of time.
Yeah. So, anyway, but the same level with which I need to contend with these two in those functions are not the same that I have to contend with my spouse.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's right.
In your spouse relationship, if you're looking for the Lord, he is going to squeeze you. And this sounds like a negative context, and I used to would think that it would, but it's not. He is going to force the kingdom facings, so to speak, because you can't chunk your wife out the window or your spouse. These two guys, I don't have to deal with things if they bring things to the table necessarily. But with her, I do.
Well, and on that note, in our culture, marriage is throwaway. It's a consumable. But in the eyes of God, and I please, if you've had practice marriages or whatever out there, and you're watching this,
I'm not judging and beating people that have divorced and all that. Not at all.
But let us speak to that young couple out there that hadn't had that happen yet. If marriage is, and the scriptures say that it is, and we didn't get a lot into the text today about this, but it is a picture of Jesus' relationship with the bride.
Right.
If that's true, and it is,
right,
then we have to treat our marriage relationships like that. And God and Jesus were one. Jesus and the bride are one. There is no what's going to happen if this doesn't work.
Yeah.
It is. And what are we going to do with it, period? And so as we wrap up, I wanted to give 3 or 4 things. Maybe if you guys kind of sit and think about 1 or 2 things that you could. I'm thinking about the young man, the young girl, the newlywed, the less than 10-year person that picks this up. That they know in their head that to be a good spouse and to support their spouse, they need to pursue the kingdom.
Right.
And they're okay with that. But they're also looking for something. What can I do this Thursday to make them feel supported? And those are little things that seem maybe not worldly is not the right word, but temporal.
Come on.
But they're outflows of what Tim read when we started, which is what you got to do is sit down and think, how can I consider the other person more highly than I consider myself? And Hebrews says to do that with each other in the church too.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So Tim will hate this. And
what a great way to start.
Literally make a list. What is in this house, in this marriage, in this relationship, what are my things? Right?
Yeah.
And then as we go along, why is that my thing?
Yeah.
Do I need that?
Right.
Is is that keeping us from having a relationship like we talk about Kraft having a relationship? Is that thing that is my thing, is it keeping us from being closer? Right.
Right.
And guys, it could be golf.
Your bass boat.
It could be work. There's about a million things. It could be look at those things. Just make a list.
Well, and I know a guy. Let me back up. Let me be more general.
Okay.
If you're a young couple and you have children,
Mhm.
if you have the idea, men, that your job is to help with the housework or help with the kids, you've got the wrong idea.
Right.
It's your house and your kids too.
Come on. Come on.
You're not helping her with her job and not doing what you want to do. It's your job too. Get up off your rusty bucket, turn the video game off, and go wash the dadgum dishes.
Right.
Go put the kids to bed, you selfish slug. Okay? I don't know how else to get that direct.
And here's the thing.
Sorry, I just
And
got
it doesn't mean you
passionate
have to
about
do
that.
it. And
Right.
if you give her a break, go do it with her.
Yeah.
Right. I never, and I know I'm just weird sometimes, right? But there was, I don't know, it wasn't that it was one of those things where I ever felt like I was giving her a break. It was, wow, this is my opportunity,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that little boy comes up feeling like he is loved and nurtured from both parents,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's not a her job but a my job thing, right?
Right. Let me tell you, as we wrap,
I'll get off your rusty bucket. I like that.
let me tell you something. That if you wanna get your emotional bucket full, okay?
Come on.
I grew up in a household where my dad got up and left the house to go to work at 3:50 in the morning. You're familiar with that kind of
Mhm.
schedule. And didn't get home until 6:30 at night.
Right.
Drove to Garland or Wiley every day forever. My
Right.
entire meal.
Right.
Would come in, grab a quick shower, and would help my mother get dinner on the table. When dinner was over, he did the dishes every night. That was the way it was.
Right.
Gave of himself. I can remember going to basketball games and looking up in the stands, and my dad is there in his work clothes,
Oh.
getting home at midnight and getting up and leaving the house at 3:50 in the morning to go to work.
Yeah.
And he's still, to this day,
Right.
my mother doesn't put gas in her car. He puts gas in her car.
Right.
I'm not that good. My wife
Right,
has to
right.
pump her own gas.
Right.
Why? Some people say, "Oh, he's whipped," or "He's this."
Mhm.
You know what my mother will say?
Right.
She's kept.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
She's a kept woman.
Yep.
She's cared for. She's loved. And it's not about that she can't do those things.
Right.
I said when I started this little rant, I said, you want to get your bucket full.
Mhm.
I tried to live my life in front of my kids that way.
Right. Absolutely.
Helping mom, making them help,
Yep.
doing things. If she needs it, we do it, that sort of a thing. To watch my grown sons
Mhm.
and my son-in-law
Mhm.
serve their spouses
Right.
and future spouse
Right.
in the same way that I watched my dad
Yeah.
and his dad.
Right.
Generational.
Yep.
We're pop, dad, me. We're 4 generations deep now of examples.
Mhm.
I don't have the words to describe to you how awesome it is to see your progeny living out selflessness
Yep.
of the
Absolutely.
kingdom
Yep.
to their spouse, and to see their spouses feel supported.
Yep.
It'll do something for you.
And the flip side of that is, and I've had this happen, and we tend to be, there's something about us, the way we're wired, that receiving honor just puffs us up and gets us ready to go, right? Well, coming home from work, wife makes you a glass of tea, whatever. You send the kid to do something, and the kid was like, "Well, Dad, why don't you do that?" and you just grin and blow it off. It's not a second thought in your mind, right? And you go to the next room doing whatever, and you can hear the lecture going on in the next room about your dad gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning, your dad does this, your dad does that, so get off your butt. And we serve each other around here.
And it's really what it boils down to. How do I support my spouse? You serve them.
That's it.
Yeah.
And that Tim said something a while ago, that this kind of stuff spills over into your other relationships.
Right.
If you're not going to church this Sunday looking for an opportunity to serve somebody, then you've missed a major reason for being there.
Come on.
And I don't mean necessarily about serving on a team. I'm talking about, I see somebody over there that's got a boot on their leg because they jacked their leg up. Hey, did you want a pig in a blanket or a cup of coffee today?
So
they'll get that for you.
Not in an official capacity.
Not an official capacity.
Right.
Just looking for opportunities in the moment that may not be there next time to serve somebody.
Yes.
If you can do that in your marriage,
yep.
I listen for things like when my wife blows her breath. It's almost annoying to her sometimes. And I'm like, what happened now?
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to do? And then you learn over time to measure that. It's like, okay, she just needs me to leave her alone. Maybe that's it. I don't know. A lot of times that's it. But looking for those opportunities. How do you support your wife? You serve them. You die to yourself. That's what it means to pick up your cross and follow Jesus. Die to yourself. Consider them more important. Not equal. Not equal.
Right.
You're not equals. Your spouse is more important than you. Look right at me in the camera.
Come on.
Your spouse is more important than you. That's what the Bible says. And you know what? So is Bruce more important than me. Tim's more important than me in our relationship with each other.
I'm way more.
Way. I'm prettier, but they're more important. But anyway, we're going to run out of time. I've got some people specifically, I know they're going to watch this episode.
Right.
Wanting to know, how do I support my spouse?
Right.
You be as much like, what is John Mark Comer's book? Be with Jesus, be like Jesus, do what he did.
Right.
Give up everything for them.
You have to learn what that is.
And pursue it.
You have to pursue it.
Yeah.
And over time, those things come, and you may change a little bit in that regard. I've been sitting here looking at one of the comments there, because love isn't a feeling, it's a choice. And as a practical sense, I would tell you that it's both. When I'm looking at Margie and I'm full of myself and all that, my emotion to love her might not be there, but I capture that and I do make that choice.
Which can turn back into the emotion.
But overall, you need to be able to see if you're having to make that choice all the time, you got some growing to do and you're playing Cain. But you get to some point,
that's good though. No,
I don't even mean that as a condemnation. I'm just telling you how it is.
I just hadn't thought of it like that.
But the other side of it is most of the time when I'm looking at her now, after 38 years, I still can't breathe.
Right.
Come on.
And so
I feel that.
And so I bring that up to say, I can't even tell you if that was learned or whatever it is, but I know this. And it turns out she was thinking the same thing. We just weren't going to quit.
Yes, that's what you were starting.
And
quit.
Don't
quit. That's how you serve your spouse.
And philosophical people come around, they'll tell you, don't get married before you're 30 or all this. That's a bunch of hogwash. I'm not saying you should get married young.
That's a different episode.
It's a different episode, but I'm just saying you
just don't
pursue the kingdom. And it says to think more highly of them. Sometimes that's a learned thing.
That's absolutely a learned thing.
Yeah.
What do you mean I don't think highly of them? Well, you might be learning what that is. And when you figure it out, you go, oh, man.
We've got to go.
Yeah.
We've got to go. But I had a thought while you were talking, and I just lost it.
Who knew Tim was such a romantic? He made me cry.
I know. I will say this. I am more in love with my wife today than I was the day we got married 30 years ago, and I didn't think that was possible. But it's learned. Tim's bringing out a point here. It's not all going to happen at once.
Right.
It's going to happen over time. It's supposed to be that way. Don't freak out if it feels like you're under the pile.
Right.
Don't quit. Oh, I know what the thought was.
Yeah.
The Bible says that salvation comes to those who will endure to the end.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
We can have that talk theologically some other time. But I'm going to tell you, romance, emotion, successful marriages come to those who just freaking will not quit.
Yeah, come on, that's good.
Just don't quit. And
Yeah.
and you know what? It applies to your pursuit of the kingdom too.
That's right.
Don't quit. It's hard sometimes. Don't quit.
Right.
Loving on people that hate you is hard. Don't quit. Don't quit.
Amen.
We're going to title this one, Don't Quit. We
I
love
like
you
it.
guys.
I like it.
We don't have all of our bells and whistles in our intros and outros today because of technical difficulties, but we love you guys, and we will talk to y'all later.
Amen.
Bye.
So.